Mahit Dzmare has been an ambassador for less than 6 days when she stands over her predecessor's preserved corpse wearing a gray formal jacket 2 sizes too small, and inside her head, the dead man's voice starts screaming. For 3 weeks, she's carried Yskandr Aghavn, his personality, his memories, his 15 years out-of-date diplomatic instincts, surgically implanted at the base of her brainstem, a technology her tiny mining station has kept secret for generations. Now she's looking at Yskandr's body, cyanotic and filmed over, injection sites marking his carotid, his wrist, his thumb. And the Iskand in her skull is flooding her nervous system with adrenaline and cortisol, his terror bleeding across the blood-brain barrier into her own, seeing what he became, saying, "That's me, that's what I became," and then the voice cuts out. 4. Torn together. Not dormant, gone. Mahit is alone in her own head for the first time since she was 16, standing in the judiciary morgue of the empire she's admired her entire life, holding herself upright on the edge of a steel table, inches from the cold fingers of a man she was sent to replace. She doesn't know who killed him. She doesn't know that someone sabotaged the memory in her skull before she ever left home. She doesn't know the empire is days away from declaring an annexation war targeting her station. She just knows the voice is silent, and across the city, the people who murdered her predecessor are watching to see if she's useful enough to keep alive. A Memory Called Empire by Arkady-Martine turns a political thriller into something stranger. The seduction of empire made physical what it costs to love a culture that might be planning to consume yours. Mahit isn't a reluctant outsider. She's an empire's ideal reader, fluent in its poetry and its power structures, carrying the recorded consciousness of a man who loved the empire so much he was willing to sell it his people's most dangerous technology. You can feel Yskandr going silent, feel Mahit's isolation in a palace where every conversation is also a probe, feel the impossible choice she'll face when the dying emperor offers to spare her station if she'll give him what her dead predecessor promised, a way to cheat death. It won the 2020 Hugo Award, but what makes it stay with you isn't the accolade. It's the way the political maneuvering never loses its emotional grip. The murder mystery that doubles as an interrogation of assimilation, and a slow-building revelation that the biggest threat to Lsel station isn't the imperial fleet heading toward it. It's something stranger, massing at the edge of known space, something that doesn't think at all. Episode 1: The Corpse in the Judiciary. Before Mahit Dzmare ever saw the city, she was already a vessel. 26 years old, raised on a mining station the size of a small moon, and chosen by the Council of Lsel to carry a dead man in her skull. The imago machining sat at the base of her brainstem, its microfilaments woven through her neural tissue, and inside it lived a recording of Ambassador Yskandr Aghavn, the man she was replacing, the man who had not sent a transmission home in 3 months. His last imprint was 15 years out of date. The council saw her off with the kind of formality that felt like a funeral. Councillor Darj Taretz watched the Teixcalaanli warship retreat through the jump gate, its hull still broadcasting imperial identification codes. He stood at the observation window long after the ship vanished, and what he felt was not fear. He felt hope, a secret, treasonous hope that the losses Lsel had suffered at the Animamet Gate, the 2 scout ships that had vanished with garbled transmissions and destroyed imago lines, might mean something larger than Teixcalaanli was out there. Something that could push back. Councillor Teixcalaanli brought him the report herself. 2 ships, no survivors, no recoverable memory. Taratz filed the report and said nothing about what he suspected. The alien threat was his to know and his to weaponize, and he had already put his piece on the board. Yskandr had been that piece 15 years ago, and now Mahit Dzmare was carrying his echo into the heart of empire. She descends toward the jewel of human space. The descent through atmosphere took 4 hours. Mahit pressed her face to the viewport and watched the city rise up to meet her. It was not a city in any sense she understood. It was a planet skinned in metal and pale stone, an ecumenopolis that covered every landmass, every continental shelf, leaving only the ocean's untouched vast curves of turquoise that gleamed like polished glass between the gray-white sprawl. She could see the transport networks as fine lines of light, the towers as needles, the spaceports as dark scars. The scale of it made her chest tight. Inside her head, Yskandra's imago stirred. "Look at it," he said, and the voice was not sound but sensation, a pressure behind her eyes. A taste like copper, a wash of something that felt like pride, the jewel of human space. The city at the center of everything. He was speaking Teixcalaanli, the most intimate register, the one reserved for clonesibs and lovers. Mahit had studied the language for 12 years. She had passed the civil service examinations with scores high enough to qualify for citizenship if the empire ever offered it to people like her. But hearing it inside her own skull, spoken with Yskandr's cadences and his 15-year-old certainties, was different. "Stop using my eyes," she said, aloud. The couple in the descent pod's neighboring seats glanced at her and looked away. "Barbarian," their expressions said, "talks to herself." "You're my successor," Yskandr said. "This is what it means. You carry what I knew." 3 weeks they had been integrated. 3 weeks of Yskandr learning her nervous system, her endocrine responses, the shape of her thoughts. And already he was comfortable enough to borrow her vision without asking. Yskandr's imago takes her body at the spaceport. The spaceport at Ascension's Red Harbor was the size of a small station or city. Mahit walked through the arrivals hall with her single piece of luggage, and the woman waiting for her was sharp-featured and neatly dressed in the pale gray of the Information Ministry, a cloud hook gleaming at her left temple. "Ambassador," the woman said, and her formal bow was exact to the millimeter. "I am Seagrass, as Secreta of the Information Ministry, assigned as your cultural liaison. The judiciary has requested your immediate presence to discuss the fate of your predecessor." Mahit Dzmare, the new Lsel ambassador, opened her mouth to respond, and Yskandr's imago took her body. It was not possession. The integration wasn't nearly complete enough for that, but it was interference. Her right arm jerked upward in an outdated gesture of greeting, her fingers spread wrong, and her other hand lost its grip on the luggage. The bag hit the polished floor with a sound that echoed. "They changed the greeting protocol," Yskandr said, and Mahit felt his irritation like a static charge. "That was the formal variant when I left." Seagrass watched the performance with an expression that gave away nothing at all. "You have studied our customs," she said. "The gesture you attempted fell out of use 12 years ago, after the second ministry reform. Your dedication is noted." Mahit righted her bag. Her face was hot. "I apologize for the clumsiness. Lead the way." She did not apologize for Yskandr, and Yskandr did not apologize to her. The imago goes silent in the morgue. The judiciary building rose out of the palace complex like a blade of gray stone. Guards flanked the entrance carrying shock sticks, not the ornamental batons of 15 years ago, but serious riot suppression weapons humming faintly with stored charge. Mahit noticed them. Yskandr noticed them too, and what he felt was alarm. "Those weren't there when I left." Seagrass walked her through security checks, through corridors lined with bas-reliefs of imperial conquests, and down a set of stairs into air that smelled of preservative chemicals. The morgue. Mahit knew where they were going before Seagrass said a word, and the knowing made her cold. The room was white and cold. A technician named Forlever met them at the door, and behind him, on a steel table under a sheet, lay a shape Mahit recognized before the cloth was drawn back. Yskandr had been dead for 3 months. The body was preserved, not embalmed Teixcalaanli. Science could keep tissue viable almost indefinitely, but the signs of death were unmistakable. His eyes were filmed over, the corneas clouded blue. His skin had the faintly cyanotic tint of long oxygen deprivation. Injection sites marked his carotid, his ulnar vein, the pad of his right thumb. "They pumped him full of something," Yskandr said, and his voice in Mahit's head had changed. The static was worse. She could feel his panic as a chemical flood, adrenaline and cortisol spilling across the blood-brain barrier, his terror becoming her terror because the microfilaments didn't know the difference between a host's emotion and an imago's. "That's me," Yskandr said. "That's what I became." And then the static crested into something unbearable, a scream that was not sound, a pressure that was not physical, an overload that cascaded through every circuit of the imago machine. Mahit felt her knees buckle. She caught herself on the edge of the table, her hand inches from the corpse's cold fingers. Then silence. Nothing. She reached for Yskandr and found only the architecture of her own mind. The imago was gone, not dormant, gone. She had been carrying a dead man, and now he was dead twice. Mahit kept one hand on the cold edge of the steel table. Forlever's mouth was still moving something about a protein sensitivity, a tragic accident. anaphylaxis at a dinner with the Minister for Science, a man called Ten Pearl, but she was watching the corpse's fingers, the way they had curled slightly, as if Yskandr had tried to grip something in his last breath. She heard herself asking questions. She heard herself making diplomatic noises. Inside, she was screaming into the void where Yskandr used to be. Yskandra's encrypted mail reveals unauthorized troop movements. 3 Seagrass walked her to the ambassadorial suite in silence. Mahit's legs carried her through the palace complex, past gardens and fountains and courtiers who glanced at the new barbarian and then away. And the whole time she was reaching into the dark of her own skull, hoping for a response that did not come. The suite was Yskandra's. He had lived here for 15 years, and the rooms still bore his taste. Sparse furnishings, a collection of Teixcalaanli poetry and physical books, a window that looked out onto the eastern gardens. Mahit stood in the center of the main room and felt like a stranger in her predecessor's skin. 3 Seagrass gave her an hour to settle, and then she returned with a stack of infofeach sticks. "The late ambassador's encrypted mail," she said. 3 months of it. I am legally your absolute equivalent and authorized to help you with decryption. Is that an offer or a requirement? It is the law, 3 Seagrass said, and her smile was polite and impenetrable. The ciphers are poetic, the best encomiastic poem of the season. Currently, 2 calendars reclamation song. I can walk you through the process. Mahit thought about refusing. She thought about locking the door and trying to force the imago back online through sheer desperation. But Mahit was alone in a foreign empire. Her dead predecessor was a silent void in her skull, and 3 Seagrass standing right there in the lamplight with a stack of infofeach sticks was offering help that Mahit could not afford to refuse. "Show me," she said. They worked for hours. Visa requests, repatriation documents, half-signed military transit permits. Yskandr had been in the middle of processing a stack of safe passage authorizations for Teixcalaanli warships when he died. Mahit filed each document and said nothing, but the pattern was clear. Yskandr had been facilitating troop movements through Lsel's jumpgate corridor, and he had been doing it without asking the council's permission. Combiné. 12 Azalea finds metal in Yskandra's skull. 12 Azalea arrived at sundown. He was a patrician from Information Ministry, tall and fine-boned, and he kissed 3 Seagrass on the temple with a familiarity that made Mahit reassess their relationship. He was also carrying news. "I have a full-body scan of your predecessor," he said, "from the judiciary's medical examination. There is metal in his skull, Ambassador, quite a lot of it, concentrated at the brainstem." "I thought you might want to know before someone else noticed." Mahit's stomach dropped. The imago machine. 15 years old, still embedded in Yskandra's corpse, and the Teixcalaanli had found it. "It could be a pacemaker," she said, "for epilepsy. Stationers sometimes require neural regulation." 12 Azalea's expression was perfectly neutral. "Is that so? I haven't told anyone," he added. Yet, the threat hung in the air like a held breath. 19 Ads visits the morgue and tests the new ambassador. The second visit to the morgue happened that night. Mahit needed to see the implant, needed to confirm that 12 Azalea was telling the truth. 3 Seagrass came with her. 12 Azalea led them past the night shift technicians and straight to Yskandra's table. The body had not moved. The filmed eyes still stared at nothing. But when Mahit turned the head to one side and ran her thumb up the cervical spine, she found the scar. It was tiny, no longer than her thumbnail, and beneath it she could feel the hard ridge of the machine, the container that held Yskandra's external imago, the recording that should have been destroyed when his internal imago was extracted for integration. Someone had left it in. Before she could process that, the door opened behind her. 19 Ads moved like a blade. She was Izuzuakat, sworn companion to the emperor himself, and she wore bone white from throat to ankle, a color that meant absolute loyalty, absolute proximity to the throne. Her face was beautiful and unreadable, and when she looked at Yskandra's corpse, Mahit saw grief pass across it like a shadow. "I came to pay my respects," 19 Ads said. "He was dear to me." She touched Yskandra's face. She touched his hand. And Mahit, standing beside the body of the man she carried, felt the weight of something she did not understand. "Are you performing a vigil?" 19 Ads asked. Mahit heard herself say, "Yes, stationer custom. I must watch over the body." The lie came out smooth, and 19 ads accepted it with a tilt of her head. Then I will leave you to it. But I am curious, Mahit, you are very different from him. I wonder what that means. She used Mahit's given name, no title, no honorific. It was a violation of Teixcalaanli formality, so complete that 3 Seagrass inhaled audibly. And Mahit understood in that moment that 19 ads was testing her, probing for the connection that she suspected. When the Izuasuakat left, the morgue felt colder. The Truth Pact binds 3 allies together. 3 Seagrass proposed the Truth Pact. She cited a literary reference, 11 Lsel dispatches from the numinous frontier, and spoke the formula carefully, binding herself and 12 Azalea and Mahit in a circle of honest exchange. I asked to be your liaison, 3 Seagrass said, because I wanted to see what Yskandra's successor would be like, and because I like aliens. I always have. It is not a fashionable preference. The confession was small and enormous. Mahit understood that 3 Seagrass was offering her something vulnerable, something that could be used against her. 12 Azalea went next. I am investigating Yskandra's murder. The Science Ministry 10 Pearl has been feuding with the Information Ministry, and someone ordered his medical records sealed. The death was no accident. Then they looked at Mahit. She told them about the imago machines. She told them what they were, how they worked, how Lsel preserved its best minds across generations. She implied, without stating outright, that she carried Yskandra's recording inside her. And when 3 Seagrass reached out to touch her hand, a gesture of comfort, of solidarity, Mahit let her. She was so desperately alone. 15 engine sees Yskandr in her, then dies in the bombing. The next morning, the imago was still silent. Mahit woke in Yskandra's bed, tested the edges of her consciousness for any sign of him, and found only the hollow where he used to be. She slammed her hand against the wall hard enough to bruise her knuckles. The pain was clarifying. 3 Seagrass arrived with news. She had arranged a meeting with 15 Engine, Yskandra's former cultural liaison, a man who had retired from the Information Ministry a decade ago and now lived quietly away from the court. He might know something about Yskandra's death, or about whatever deal Yskandr had been trying to make before he died. They took the subway. The city's transit system was a neural network of tunnels and light, and on the wall someone had pasted anti-imperial propaganda, a glyph that meant rot. It repeated in red and black, and beneath it the name of a colony called Odile, where insurrection was apparently brewing. 3 Seagrass looked at the posters and said nothing, but her jaw tightened. At Plaza Central 9, Mahit stepped out into sunlight so fierce it felt physical, and before she could orient herself, before she could even find 15 Engine in the crowd, the memory hit her a flash so vivid it was almost a seizure. Yskandra's hand, bleeding into a golden bowl. A voice saying, "We're sworn to a purpose, your blood and mine." The taste of copper and ritual wine. Then it was gone, and she was back in the plaza, and a man with a bronze cloud hook was approaching her, and he was saying, "Stars, Yskandr, she's a quarter of your age." What does that feel like? 15 Engine had known Yskandr well enough to see him in Mahit's posture, her expression, the way she held her hands. He knew about the imago. He knew what she was, and he was not happy to see her. Breakfast was served at an outdoor cafe overlooking the plaza. 15 Engine ordered tea and fruit and spoke in clipped sentences, his wariness apparent. Mahit tried to ask about Yskandra's death, about the deal, about whatever had gone wrong in the final months of her predecessor's life. "Yskandra's dead," 15 Engine said. "The man I knew is gone. I have nothing to say to you." He gathered himself to stand. The bowl of flowers on the table tipped. Water sloshed across the stone. Mahit opened her mouth to argue, to plead, to demand. The bomb went off. It was close. Close enough that the heat of the blast seared the exposed skin of Mahit's face. Close enough that the pressure wave threw her sideways out of her chair and onto the flagstones. The sound came a moment later, a roar that seemed to compress the world into a single point of violence. When Mahit could see again, 15 Engine was on the ground. His chest was torn open. His throat was a red ruin. The bomb had been attached to him, or thrown at him, or triggered from inside his own body. There was no way to tell. He was dead before she could reach him. Trapped by the city's blue fire walls while 3 Seagrass falls. 3 Seagrass was screaming her name. Someone's hands, a stranger's, pulled Mahit upright from behind, and she staggered, and the smoke was in her throat, and Seagrass was still screaming her name, and through the smoke, Mahit could see the air turning blue ionized light, flickering like a localized aurora, and then the walls began to rise. The city was trapping them. Transparent panels of what looked like glass shot up from the flagstones, each one inscribed with lines of poetry. Seagrass was shouting into her cloud hook, subvocal commands that the city should have obeyed, but instead of opening, the nearest wall printed a single word, granted, and then exploded into blue fire, transit. Seagrass touched the wall and the electricity took her. She spasmed and fell, and Mahit caught her, and the blue fire died, and they were inside a box made of poetry with no way out. Mahit called for help. The bystanders who had not fled stared at her with expressions that ranged from pity to fear. One man came close enough to press a bottle of water into her hand. "Not everyone in the city loves the city," he said, and then he vanished into the crowd before she could ask what he meant. The sunlit arrived minutes later, police in polished gray armor. They moved like the algorithm-adjusted unit they were, echoing each other's gestures, speaking in synchronized phrases. They wanted to take Mahit into Ministry of War custody. For her protection, they said. Because the previous ambassador had died, because the bombings were getting worse, because a foreigner needed to be kept safe. Mahit looked at Seagrass, still unconscious in her arms, and made a decision. "I have a prior appointment with 19 ads," she said. "The Izuazuakat is expecting me." "I will not go with you." The sunlit hesitated. 19 ads' name had weight, even among the military, and the pause was long enough for Mahit to press her advantage. "Call her office. Confirm the appointment, and get an ambulance for my liaison." They did, reluctantly. The medics who took Seagrass told Mahit that city strikes, those blue fire traps, were happening more often now. No one knew why. The ghost of Yskandr surfaces in 19 ads' shower. 19 ads received her in an office that overlooked the eastern gardens. Mahit was still covered in 15 engines' blood. Her hands were trembling. The hollow in her skull where Yskandr should have been felt like a wound. "That," 19 ads said, gesturing at the blood, at the trembling, at the whole catastrophe of Mahit's presence, "is the first smart move you've made." "Coming here. Clever," Mahit said, remembering her earlier adjective, "but not smart. Cleverness gets you killed. Yskandr was clever. You are going to have to be smarter than he was." The Ezuzuakat offered sanctuary, a room, a change of clothes, a hot shower. Mahit accepted all three because she had no other options, because the imago was dead, because the only person who had been willing to help her was in a hospital bed with electrical burns, because the empire was visibly fracturing around her, and she did not yet understand the shape of the cracks. The shower was hot, the water pressure was perfect, and when Mahit closed her eyes beneath the spray, she felt something that was not her own body, a man's hand, broader than hers, resting on the tile. A man's torso, lean and scarred, the ghost of Yskandr imprinted on her nervous system so deeply that even with the imago offline, his sensory memories surfaced when triggered. He had stood in this shower before. He had been with 19 ads. The vision faded, and Mahit was alone again. But now she knew something she had not known an hour before. Yskandr and the Ezuasuakat had been lovers, and 19 ads, who offered sanctuary, who called Mahit smart, who had come to the morgue to touch a dead man's face, 19 ads had a reason for everything she did. Mahit turned off the water and began to plan. Episode 2, The Price of Independence. Mahit woke in borrowed clothes, in a borrowed room, with nothing in her skull but her own thoughts and the persistent, aching absence where Yskandr should have been. She tested the silence, the way you test a tooth that might be cracked, probing the edges, hoping not to find what you feared. Nothing. The dead ambassador's memory had not flickered back to life while she slept. Her bruised hip had bloomed into a continent of purple and black, the size of her spread hand. Pain, at least, was evidence she was still alive. "Stop pretending." 19 ads received her in the office overlooking the eastern gardens. Her cloud hook dismissed with a gesture. "Sit. You look better without blood on your face." Mahit sat. The chair was deliberately low. Teixcalaanli furniture was never neutral. "When I knew Yskandr, he told me something about your station. about how you preserve your best minds. The Izu Suakat's hands rested still on the desk. He said the next ambassador would carry him, that he would be inside them. Is that true? The question hung. Mahit thought about lying, then remembered the truth pact with her liaison and 12 Azalea. Honesty had bought her allies, yes. Then I would like to talk to Yskandr. Either stop pretending to be Mahit Dzmare, or allow him to speak. I know you can. The words revealed everything. 19 ads had been waiting through the morgue, the bomb, the sanctuary offered and accepted for Yskandra's voice to come out of Mahit's mouth. I can't, Mahit said. The silent imago of Yskandr is broken. When I saw his body, something overloaded. He went silent. I have been alone inside my own head for days. The admission cost her. Confessing failure to her liaison had been one thing. Admitting it to the woman who had loved Yskandr, who had touched his body with tender grief and expected to hear him again, was something else entirely. 19 Ads' expression remained composed, but something behind her eyes flickered. I see, that is inconvenient. She asked more questions. Mahit corrected her definition. An imago was not a recording but live memory, personality, intuition, the taste of rain on a planet the carrier had never visited. The oldest lines on Lsel ran 14 generations deep, and Yskandr was out of date, Mahit said, 15 years out. Whatever deals he made, I only have the version of him that existed before he came here. Then you don't know what he promised, 19 Ads said softly. No, the silence was crowded with everything unsaid. Ads broke it by changing the subject. You were going to meet 15 Engine. What did you hope to learn? How Yskandr died? I don't believe the anaphylaxis story. Good, you shouldn't. She ticked beneficiaries off on her fingers. 30 Larkspur who would not want a dissident alive. Anti-imperial activists if Engine had become a liability, and you if you wanted to appear silenced. I don't think you did it, but I am listing possibilities. This is how politics works. Before Mahit could respond, 5 agates stepped in carrying a portable screen. Your Excellency, you need to see this. Plaza Central 7, a crowd of several hundred, faces painted with red streaks mimicking sacrificial blood, chanted a single name, One Lightning. One Lightning. One Lightning. Yaudalek One Lightning, 5 agates said flatly. Commander of the 18th Legion. No major victories. But he has trained a subordinate, 3 Sumac, who has been praising him on the feeds for weeks. The red paint is an old ritual, 19 AZ explained. Before a war, citizens would mark themselves with sacrificial blood, a promise to give their lives if the war required it. They are acclaiming a war leader, and they are doing it publicly in a plaza under city surveillance, which means someone in the science ministry is allowing it. Mahit thought of the subway posters, the rot glyph, the stranger wad said, not everyone in the city loves the city. A coup was being assembled in pieces, and she stood in the middle of it, with no functioning imago, few allies, and no idea who wanted her dead first. The succession and the messages. The emperor is 84. The Izu Zuakat told her after 5 agate left. He has no biological children. There are 3 imperial associates. 30 Larkspur, who controls merchant fleets and would control a child emperor. 8 Loop, from the judiciary, who believes in law over personality and is suspicious of expansion. And 8 Antidote, a 90% clone, 10 years old, raised as a vessel for the imperial will. An ideal succession would crown him co-emperor. In practice, military commanders claim the throne, which is why a Yaotlek's acclamation is so dangerous. You need to find out who authorized your urgent entrance permit, she continued. Someone summoned you here before Yskandra's body was cold. Find out who, and you may begin to understand why he died. Mahit spent the rest of the day composing messages. The first, in poetic cipher, went to 12 Azalea. The second, a formal request to the Ministry of Information for the authorization record. The third, a copy of her correspondence to her own archives of precaution. The next morning brought 3 replies. Unquote. Mahit's ally had sent a coded poem. Sanctuary may be temporary. If you need extraction, send signal. 10 Pearl had sent a condescending invitation to discuss the automated systems projects your predecessor undertook. And the third message made her blood run cold. It was from Teixcalaanli, triggered the moment she had accessed the ambassadorial database. If sabotage exists and originates on Lsel, unable to verify the condition. Your imago recording was sponsored by Heritage and Miners. Sabotage may originate from Amnardbat for heritage. What we have sent to you may be a weapon pointed at you. Mahit read it 3 times. The failure of Yskandra's memory was not shock or neurological mismatch, it was deliberate. Someone on Lsel had sent her to Teixcalaanli with a broken weapon in her skull. Interlude. The saboteur on Lsel station, Agnel Amnardbat, stood in the imago machine storage room, once soothing, now unsettling. Teixcalaanli warships were massing at the jump gate, and somewhere in the heart of the empire, Mahit Dzmare was walking around with a version of Yskandr she had personally damaged. She remembered the righteous fury. Yskandr had grown to love the empire more than his own people, whispering accommodation, calling it survival. When the council ordered his machine retrieved, she had taken it from its container marked PN-T2 and filed her nails to points. She had scraped the fragile nanocircuits that linked imago to brainstem, ensuring they would fail, not immediately, but catastrophically. Now she tasted adrenaline and felt her own imago's displeasure, the generations of archivists troubled by what she had done. If Mahit Dzmare was trying to save Lsel and her machine was broken, and the Empire was coming, what had Amnardbat actually accomplished? 3 Seagrass returns and the banquet. The liaison walked in without warning, looking hollow-eyed and exhausted, red marks still visible on her palms. "You're still alive." "I was half convinced 19 ads would have eaten you by now. She's been hospitable. She's been keeping you as a hostage. Don't mistake it for anything else." 3 Seagrass collapsed into a chair. "There's a banquet tonight at Palace Earth. All the court will be present. It's an opportunity to be displayed and to find out who authorized your summons. So to be the tame barbarian." "Yes, and you can use it. You're good at being underestimated. Palace Earth at night was a fever dream of light fan-vaulted ceiling trailing golden sparks, black marble floor polished to a mirror." Mahit wore the gray formal jacket 19 ads had provided, the color of Lsel's walls. Her handler murmured names and factions as they descended. "There's 9 May's much better poet than he should be, much more dangerous. Has 30 larkspurs, man, or will be when it's advantageous." The co-heir materialized before them, beautiful, dark-eyed, a spray of purple larkspur pinned to his collar. His smile was warm and entirely empty. "Ambassador Dzmare, I have been hoping to meet you. Your predecessor and I had an arrangement." "I'm aware," Mahit said, though she wasn't. "The deal is off. I thought you should know." He smiled again and walked away. Mahit stared after him. "What deal?" "I have no idea," 3 Seagrass said, "but whatever it was, Yskandr made it, and now it's broken and the war fleet is already moving towards Lsel. And Mahit saw the Emperor then. Sixth Direction was small, frail, skin gray with illness. When her turn came in the receiving line, Mahit went down on one knee and placed her hand flat against her chest, the Abrekti salute, a deliberate reminder that she came from somewhere the Empire could not claim to have created. The Emperor reached out and took her wrist. His fingers were fever-hot, and something inside Mahit's skull lurched. Not the dead ambassador's memory returning, something older. Oxytocin and adrenaline, the residue of intimacy, Yskandra's body memory responding to a touch it recognized. She swayed, then Sixth Direction released her, and she stepped aside, pulse hammering. It was proof irrefutable that Yskandr and the Emperor had been more than diplomats. She found 10 pearl near the refreshment table. The science minister looked at her like an interesting insect. "How are you finding our city?" "Overwhelming," Mahit said, slumping her shoulders slightly. "I keep getting lost in the subway." It was a lie she'd memorized the map on her second day, but the barbarian mask was her best defense. 10 Pearl's smile widened imperceptibly. "I'm sure you'll adjust. Your predecessor had similar difficulties. Yskandr mentioned an automated systems project. He said I should talk to you." She had no idea what Yskandr had said to him, but 10 Pearl's eyes sharpened. "That project was sensitive. Perhaps we should discuss it privately." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Do be careful, Ambassador. You're already attracting 1,000 eyes, just like Aghavn did, and we both know what happened to him." 3 Seagrass extracted her seconds later. "What were you doing?" "Fishing, and I caught something." He knows more about Yskandra's death than his saying. Everyone knows more than they're saying. That doesn't mean you should offer yourself as bait. "I'm already bait. I might as well be useful bait." The poetry contest had been running for an hour when 9 Mays performed his epigram. The curl of unborn petals holds a hollowness. These things are ceaseless. Star charts disembarkments, we bring the light of civilization to dark places, and in return, they give us only their foreignness. That's not a poem about flowers, 3 whispered. That's an annexation manifesto. Mahit was already decoding it. Foreignness as a threat to be eliminated, civilization spread by force, star charts mapping the fleet movements Yskandr's visa backlog had predicted. 9 Mays was calling for her war, announcing the annexation before the emperor could. The emperor pointedly awarded the prize to 14 Spire, a dull poet who had written 17 syllables about a fountain. But the war faction was strong enough to recite annexation poetry in public and expect to win. Later, when a red-faced veteran grabbed Mahit's shoulders and shook her for questioning one lightning's battles, the purple-pinned air materialized like a blade and twisted the man's wrist away with surgical elegance. The veteran 11 conifer went pale and retreated. 30 Larkspur smiled. I do hope you're enjoying the banquet. I'll come by later to make sure you're having a good time. He winked and vanished. Mahit's hands were shaking. I think he just threatened me. Very politely. Very Teixcalaanli. 3 Seagrass took her arm. Let's go. Now. The poison gift and the deal revealed. When Mahit returned from the banquet, a flower lay on her desk, white petals delicate as frost, a spiral of beauty that she picked up without thinking. The pain was immediate and extraordinary. White sap burned her fingers, rising into blisters before she could drop it. She ran through the suite, holding her burning hand away from her body, and found 19 ads in the library. Xawatl, the Izu Sazuakat, said, going very still. Don't touch anything else. She poured mineral oil over the blistered hand. The poison is a neurotoxin. Inhaling the sap can kill you. Touching it burns. That flower was left for you by someone inside this household who knew exactly where you were working. Did Larkspur come by the suite tonight? Mahit asked. 19 ads said nothing, which was answer enough. Later, after the burns were wrapped and sedatives administered, she sat beside Mahit's bed. I wanted the imago machine at first. And the morgue, to use as a bargaining chip. Why? Because Yskandr made a promise to Six Direction. Not to me, to the Emperor. He offered the schematics to your imago machines in exchange for Lsel's independence, for as long as Six Direction's dynasty holds. The Emperor is old and dying and terrified of what happens after. Yskandr offered him a way out, a thread of memory that could survive the death of the body. That was the deal. Mahit closed her eyes. Now she understood. Yskandr had learned to think like a Teixcalaanli, to find what the other party wanted most and offer it, and then someone had killed him before the deal was completed, before Lsel's independence could be secured. The Emperor still wants the machines, Ad said. That is why you are still alive. You are the only person who can give him what he wants. The moment you stop being useful, you stop being protected. Directed. Colonization. Tracted. War declared. The next morning, every screen in the room lit up simultaneously. The Emperor's voice filled the city. I declare this day the commencement of an accession war in the Partsarwantluk sector. All unincorporated territories therein shall be offered the opportunity to join the Empire freely. Mahit stopped breathing. Partsarwantluk, the Teixcalaanli name for Bardsravand, the high plateau, the sector where Lsel and every other mining station had been built. Yalik Nema for this expedition will be one lightning. The general, with no victories, whose acclamation had been building in the plazas, was being given command of the force that would consume her home. 19 Adzi watched her. It seems you have a problem. It seems we both do, Mahit replied, steadier than she felt. You're harboring an ambassador whose station is about to be invaded. That makes me either a hostage or a liability. File or an asset, the Ezuasuakat said, depending on what you can offer. I need to speak to the Emperor, privately. Yskandr had a deal with Six Direction. Someone broke it when they killed him. I need to know if it can be remade. Ads looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled. You'll see what I can arrange. The cipher and the authorization. Back in her temporary office, Mahit composed a message using the imperial glyph book standard as cipher key. Outwardly routine, certain glyphs, spaced correctly, formed a second message, PRIORITY. Former ambassador compromised movement, restricted memory damage sovereignty, threatened request council guidance. She sent it through her handler's cloud hook. 3. Seagrass tapped her shoulder. The authorization for your summons. It took some digging. She handed Mahit an info fiche stick. The document was brief and opaque. The authorization had been issued by the imperial judiciary, under the seal of 8 Loop. The old woman 5 Agate had described as suspicious of expansion, defender of legal process, potential ally against the war faction. 8 Loop had summoned a new Lsel ambassador urgently to Teixcalaanli. But why? There's something else, 3 said, her voice subdued. 12 Azalea has the machine, Yskandra's external imago, from the morgue. He wants to meet you tomorrow morning, before dawn, to hand it over. Mahit's heart stuttered. Tell him yes. Interlude. The Emperor's bargain on Lsel station. Councillor Darj Taratz had hoped for a rival empire to check Teixcalaanli's hunger. What had founded the animate gate was something else entirely. A 3-ringed predator ship, alien and vast, killing vessels without communication or mercy. The enemy at the gate did not think. It only consumed. Now, in his office, he faced Teixcalaanli and told her the truth he'd hidden for 2 decades. Teixcalaanli needs to believe the threat is small, containable until it's too late. Yskandr was my instrument. His love for the Empire, his seduction of their emperor, it was all meant to guide them open-jawed into the maw of an empire vaster and more strange. To break them both, you used him, Anshu said. You used us.